Hi everyone, this is Nas from Info.Tech.Journal. We're going to continue on today with our journey in terms of Java and PowerShell. Specifically, we're going to continue on our path on Java Shell to actually build a solid foundation before we actually start with our actual scripts. Previously, we've already looked at these few topics. We've looked at PowerShell console. We've looked at get help dash question mark and help, and from there we know now that you can show window to have an additional window. You can actually look at syntax, and the syntax will let you know the combination of parameters that will produce your desired output, or a set of parameters that can be combined. Also, in get help, we can also look at examples to give you a better understanding, an idea of what the outcome of the specific commandlet will give you. We look at aliases. Okay, let's also remember, just to a fair bit of reminder for us and for myself as well, that when you use aliases and you decide to give your script to somebody, make sure that you have all the aliases in proper names, like the actual commandlet names, and have any and all properties, parameters named and listed correctly. So it's easier for the next person, the next engineer, the next technician to get your scripts and understand it without having to do additional guesswork or research. Okay, it just makes their life easier. And as well, if you're on vacation and you decide to just pass somebody a script that who knows what it's gonna do, and the the naming convention is unknown or the parameters are not set correctly, they're just gonna call you up during your vacation. You don't want that to happen, do you? So that's just an example. Now we look at finding commands, specifically get command with the use of wildcards as well, and to understand better nouns and verbs. So you understand the basic commandlet structure. You have a verb, get, set, stop, and then you have a noun, service, process, alert notifications. Those are nouns. Okay. In this particular video, we're going to continue on and add a few more things to our toolbox and to our knowledge of PowerShell. Again, now we're going to go to PowerShell. We're actually going to use the ISE version of PowerShell, the integrated scripting environment. Here we're going to look at the scripting pane, or the white space I would usually call it. You'll understand later why I call it white space, because it's actually just white. And here you can actually put in a few lines before you actually run or execute your script. And there's a few other things that you will look at specifically with ISE. From there, we're also going to introduce you to getMember. GetMember is a commandlet that aids you in finding the data types, methods, and properties available to your specific commandlet that you're interested. So let's say you're interested in knowing more about get process. What are the methods and properties available to you to further refine your get process? So we'll look at it a little bit later in this video as well. And as I already mentioned, methods will produce us with getMember will produce us with methods and properties. Since you know that PowerShell is an object-oriented scripting language, with any object, there's always going to be a method and properties to it. Why should we care about methods and properties of a commandlet or an object? Is because knowing it will give you a solid foundation for you to alter and create your own scripts. It makes you that more knowledgeable in terms of using PowerShell. So without further ado, let's go and open up a PowerShell ISE instance. So with PowerShell ISE, we can go ISE and run as administrator. Right, it's gonna load. As you notice here, with PowerShell ISE, this white part where I say just white art. This is, if you can just look at here, view, that's called your script pane. So if you want to hide it, you can just say view and hide the script pane. But why would you hide it? Because that's a sweet feature that's available to you in ISE. And also you have your console pane, or you just want to hide your console, you can also hide it as well from here, right? You can just hide it if you want to hide it, but let's just hide it. We'll need it for later. Okay, let's continue along. On the script pane or the white space, you can actually have multiple lines, and before you actually want to run, you can actually finish all the commands that you need. Okay. Typing enter here does not actually execute the command. So let's say if you were to just say get process, right, and I enter, it will not execute the command unless you actually press the play or run script button or the run selection. I'll explain to you a bit later on the two differences as well. So let's continue on. I already typed get process here. If you notice just now, if I type here or here, let's just type in the console, get process, you notice that something pop up. There's two pop-ups here. If you right click, it actually gives you an idea of what it is. It's actually a feature of Intellisense. Intellisense will give you the suggested commandlets based on what you typed. And the gray area here, if you can see, okay, let's continue. So get process is this gray area where you can see the scripts and the parameter options available. That is what you call your commandlet snippet. So it's just a snippet. It shows you the syntax. It shows you the options available for that particular commandlet. So I found that very useful when you're working with ISE. So just remember that it's just a part of Intellisense and snippets. So you can either right click and click on start Intellisense, or you just continue typing. It will actually give you some ideas. Let's see again, get process. By the time you type, it will also pop up. If it doesn't show up, you can right click and just start Intellisense. So from here, I want to get process. Fair enough. Now we know that an additional feature of ISE. It has Intellisense and snippets to further aid you in discovering or trying to remember the correct commandlet and parameters available to it. Okay. Again, you remember from previous video, we can actually use tab to complete. So let's say PRO, I just press tab and auto complete as well. Okay. Now we press enter here for get process. So it gives you the same output of get process. Now let's go back to our script pane. And the script pane, if you were to run get process, you would need to press the play button or run script, or you can also press F5. If you press F5, it will also execute the command. As you can see, it'll execute the command. For example, if we wanted to have a few commands, we can just type it along and it will execute all the commands until the final line. It executes from top to bottom. Let's just refresh our memory a little bit. I want to get process and I know that Firefox is open. So I'll just say here, get process. Okay. And if you press dash, it'll give you the set parameters that are available. You notice here, there's those little icons. Those just basically mean parameters. So I want to use the name parameter. So name. So if I press space again, it'll give me a few other options as well. So these are the processes that I currently have running. So if I type FIRE, you see it starts to show me Firefox. So that's just a good feature of Intellisense trying to aid you in your troubleshooting or aid you in your creation of a script. So we don't want that. If you remember, let's try to figure out. If you don't remember that Firefox is actually called Firefox, you just remember fire. You can also use the wildcard. So I'm going to say fire here, enter. So these are all the Firefox processes I have. And then let's just copy here, copy, and I'm going to paste it here. So that's going to be our first line. So let's say the second line, I'm going to get process again. And name, let's say the name is CHROME, Chrome. So that's Chrome. So these two things are different. I'm just showing you these two things so you can see that it's going to run from top to bottom, the two commands. So I'm going to clear here. So you can say clear host, clear at the bottom, and I'm going to press play. You know, if you press play, it will execute the two commands. Notice that the first part it'll execute is Firefox. The second part it will execute as Chrome. And here is the execution, Firefox and Chrome. Now let's say that you just want to execute a single line. A single line, make sure that you have the cursor at the line or at the point that you want to execute, the script that you want to execute. So here you can also press this button to play with the paper at the back, or F8 to run selection. So if you run selection, it will just run for Chrome. If you notice here, it's just for Chrome. Please bear in mind, especially if you're just starting out and you're given a script. And let's say your sysadmin says, oh yeah, this script I gave you, make sure you run line number 4, for example, or line number 3, or line number 2. I've done this before by accident, so I'm sharing it to you right now. Well, one line was actually saying stop process a certain process, and I was not aware that my cursor was actually at 4 while I thought it was at 2, or vice versa. So basically I ran stop process. You notice here, it runs stop process, it ran stop process. Good thing it was an isolated system and the process stopped and it was easily restarted. If it was any other script that you might run on the production environment, that could have been costly, especially if you have a tight SLA or an uptime that requires you to be 99.999% up. So just be sure that you're running the right line and the right command. Just a fair bit of warning. So the cursor has to be a line, and you press F8 and we'll run that particular line. That's a basic structure of ISE. Now, let's discover a way to add parameters to the commandlet. We've already added the name parameter. So that's a name parameter, correct? So let's say if you want to add another parameter. So get process. Okay. And I know the name. Let's just say Firefox. If you press dash again, it will tell you more information. Right? So these are all the parameters available to you. So if you don't remember the sequence of parameters or the combination of parameters, Intellisense will help you, aid you in giving the proper parameters to follow, or the proper structure of parameters that's available to the ones you've selected. So that's just gives you that little bit of peace of mind. Now let's continue on. We've run a get process. As you can see, here is get process. I just want to highlight something. We're going to go now into properties of commandlet. these headings that you can see here are properties of the objects. So each line that this commandlet produces is an object with these properties. Are these the only properties of these objects? No. These are the properties shown to us by the get process. Later on, we'll tweak it, tweak the table, or we can format the table. This is a formatted table. We can change the table to suit our needs in terms of what properties that we actually want to see or make visible. So, but then that is for an upcoming future video, an extension of this video in our road to better understand PowerShell. So then again, I would say all of these are properties. Yeah, and everything is an object. Okay. Now let's continue. How do I know these are properties? How do I know these are properties? So I mentioned before that we can use getMember. So what is getMember? How do we know what specifically is getMember? We can just get help and getMember. Get help, getMember. If you look at here, getMember gets the properties and methods of an object. That is the most important part. Properties and methods of an object. Here you can see the parameters again. We'll focus on two things, basically MemberType. For MemberType, we'll look at property and we'll also look at methods. If you notice here, there's also plural, which is methods and properties. And we're looking at later how do we use getMember. So getMember gets the properties and methods of an object. Okay, let's continue. So now you've already understood basically what is getMember. getMember gets properties and methods of an object. Okay. Now we're interested in understanding getProcess and what are the properties and methods of getProcess. So you say getProcess pipe. We'll explain in a future upcoming video a little bit more detail on pipe, but for now just understand that pipe takes in the first command and puts that output, put that value into the next one. So we're gonna say here pipe to getMember. Enter. So now you see here there's mainly two types, which is methods and properties. At this current stage, it is very important for you to understand that there's properties and methods. You also note that there's node property, there's alias properties, there's events. Okay, events are basically trigger events. And then you have script properties and property set. Put those aside at the moment. At this junction, we're trying to build a basic solid foundation for you to produce the PowerShell scripts. So let's focus on the two main items or two main classifications, which are property and method. Okay, I mentioned to you just now that handles and NMP, PM, WS, CPU, ID, SI, and process name, all of these are properties. So let's try and figure out specifically if that is available to us. So let's just continue with get process. I'm going to pipe it to getMember. You remember when I told you just now that when we looked at get help, with getMember, you can actually say MemberType, and there were a few member types. So right now we're interested in MemberType property or properties. So we can just say property. Also, if you look back, there's a name with getMember. we're going to look at name. If you remember name is going to be similar to all the previous one we looked at. Name can use wildcards. So our interested wildcard here is we're going to look at one property. Let's just look at process name, for instance, or just look at name with the wildcard. So I'm going to say name, and I'm going to say name. As you can see here, process name and machine name are available for get process. So process name, we looked at here, we have process name. We got process name now. Now let's just look at methods. So let's work on the top portion. Let's try running it from the script pane. So let's say get process. We pipe it to get member. And now we're interested to look at methods specifically for get process. So it's going to be MemberType. And we want to look at methods. Let's run this. If you want to run a line again, remember we can just press this button, or we can also use F8, making sure our cursor is actually on that line. Okay, we're going to run it. And here you can see these are all the methods available to us. Remember, in the previous video, we had verbs and nouns. So methods are usually actions. Actions that you can take on an object. So it's verb. A verb is an action. So if you can look at here, you can kill a process. You can refresh a process. You can start a process. A toString is basically making it into a toString. So the output is going to be a toString. You can close and dispose. So all of these are methods made available to you from PowerShell for that specific commanded, namely get process. So let's clear the screen. Now we looked at the methods and the properties of a commanded. Why is this important to us? So if you're looking at it from the perspective of developing a script, you will have to use these methods and properties and modify them to suit your needs. For example, if we were looking back at get process again, if we look at get process and we just enter, by default, it will show you these properties. By default, it will show you these properties, but there's many more properties available. So let's look at again what properties there are. So let's say get property, get process again, and look at properties. So get member, MemberType, and we look at properties. If we look at here, let's say we want to look at the virtual memory size. Virtual memory size is not by default available to us if we look at the default output of get process. So we want to alter this to suit our needs. So example, I just want to look at probably process name, and I want to look at the virtual memory size. So I'm going to say get process. Okay. Let's just limit it. So we're going to say name, and I'm going to look at just for Firefox. This additional command is to format a table. Don't worry, I'm just going to show you right now as a sneak peek of what we're going to do with the foundation that we built here for the next video. So I'm going to say format table, and I want to show the properties that I'm interested in. So the properties I'm interested in, if you look at here, the properties would be the name. So let's say process name. This is process name. Process name. CRO name and virtual memory. So I'm just gonna copy that and paste it here. And if you look at now, I have process name with virtual memory size. So these are virtual memory size, these are Firefox. If per se I did not know that the commandlet was made out, has objects that made from methods and properties, I would have not known how to format the table to the properties that I'm interested in. So that's just an example of what we learned in this video can help us to further refine and develop our scripts. So hopefully we've covered PowerShell ISE, get members, properties, and methods and properties of an object within that commandlet. And from there, we'll develop it further to effectively build our script. Hopefully you find this useful, and I wish and I hope to see you in the next video explaining further on PowerShell. Thank you.